Welcome to the Orgasmic Lifestyle Podcast by Venus O'Hara. I'm here to welcome you into the world of orgasmic living by hosting experts to discuss orgasmic topics such as nutrition, spirituality, personal development, sexuality, and much more. Here, we will offer lifestyle lessons that can help you lead a fulfilling, joyous, and orgasmic lifestyle. I'm your guide, Venus O'Hara. What if your pleasure was the portal to your power? Orgasmic manifestation. Transform your life with your sexual energy by Venus O'Hara. This is your guide to using desire as a tool for abundance, purpose, and deep self-connection. Your orgasm is more than a moment. It's a message, a manifestation, a mirror of your limitless potential. Available now on Amazon. Link in the show notes below. Orgasmic manifestation. Transform your life with your sexual energy. That is the title of my book, which has just come out on Amazon, and I'm so excited to share it with you. And this method, orgasmic manifestation, also known as sex magic, or the O method, is something that has really changed my life, and that is why I've decided to write a book about it. I love personal development, I love personal transformation, and when I learned that I could channel and harness my sexual energy and use it, directing it towards my goals, I was blown away. But before I reached that, or before I discovered this technique, I really did hit rock bottom. It was back in spring 2018. And I was living in an apartment by the beach in Barcelona, which sounds wonderful. But it was in an area that is definitely humble, I would say, to put it politely. And the buildings are made of very cheap material. And being by the sea, there was a real problem with mold, humidity, and really bad isolation. So I was freezing all the time, and I was living in a penthouse apartment, which also sounds great, but I had to walk up 6 flights of stairs, 90 steps every single day, which is also kind of good exercise. But those days when you're tired and you get home and you think, oh my God, I've forgotten to buy water, were quite challenging. But the most challenging thing about this apartment was that I had at the time 300 sex toys, but no sofa, no pillow. And it was tiny. It was 20 square meters. And because I was cold all the time, just getting undressed to have a shower was a real mission. I had to put this very small heater on just to kind of take my clothes off. It was really uncomfortable. I could even see my breath in the house. It was so cold. And the tip of my nose was always cold. And also I was going through a very difficult time financially. So I was hungry a lot of the time as well. So I was hungry or cold, or hungry and cold. That was my reality. And I remember I just met this group of vegans, a vegan social group in Barcelona, and I really enjoyed spending my time with them, because another challenge that I had in my life back then was that I felt this deep loneliness. I had just had a really bad friendship breakup just a few months earlier, and I'd been living with a friend with a very kind of, let's say, decent conditions in a very big apartment. And I had a kind of word of mouth contract with this friend who I would say at the time he was one of my best friends. But we had this very bad ending to our friendship. And it ended up being that, these verbal agreements can work when everything's fine, but when they don't, he decided, well, I don't know if he decided, but as a consequence of him not wanting me in his apartment anymore, he made my life incredibly difficult for several months. And of course, I wanted to leave, but I had nowhere to go. And at the time I think I had 3,000 subscribers on YouTube. Now I have 140,000. So just trying to get, work sponsored deals with a much smaller audience was really challenging. And I kept saying to myself when I was just trying to save up to get out of that apartment, how much do you want it? How much do you want it? And I just kept working. And through that, as a consequence of this time of real desperation, I started looking for self-help content online, and that's when I discovered Sadhguru. I discovered some very inspirational content, and I also discovered the practice of abdominal breathing. So those were my tools to help me save up to get into the next apartment, which was, even though it was, a success to actually be in this place, there were still challenges, of, for example, having a very small place, it being very cold, etc. But one thing that was wonderful was the fact that when I closed the door at night, only I had the key, because in the previous place, my friend would often come around, even though he didn't live there, and really intimidate me while I was there. So I constantly lived in fear. Every time I heard the lift go up, I was in panic mode. So just having this other apartment felt like a salvation, but also the sad reality of really, going to a much more humble area, an apartment that was, not quite, didn't even deliver on the basics. I didn't even have a sofa. I couldn't even sit at a table to eat my dinner. I mean, there was a small table there, but I decided to use it as a desk, which was probably more important at the time. But yeah, I remember when I moved to my present apartment, just sitting down at a table and putting, eating food off a table just felt like a real luxury. So in my life, I have been, I've had times that have been very, very challenging in terms of root chakra needs, food, shelter. And this time was one of those times. But I was kind of getting tired of having these experiences in my life, especially as someone who spent so many years working hard for what? To just get by. It felt like I was going uphill, and suddenly it just felt like, when you go on an escalator the wrong way, it felt like that. You're constantly moving, but using all this energy, but you're not really getting anywhere. That's exactly what my life felt like back then. So going back to, that was a bit of a massive sidetrack there, but going back to this vegan group that I had found, I just really connected with these people because I've always been vegetarian most of my life. And back at this time, I was vegetarian. And I always craved having a group of friends who I could share dining with, because when you're a vegetarian, you have to get special treatment when you go to someone's house. That can be a good thing, of course, sometimes, but you're kind of treated like an awkward person, or you feel like a fussy person. And I think I was fussy, to be honest, in my past in terms of eating habits. But suddenly when I was in a vegan dining group, suddenly I felt normal. This, how I like to eat, was celebrated and shared among people who were like-minded in the fact that they didn't think, animals are food. So that was a real great feeling of belonging and connection, which is so, so important in life in general, no matter what your beliefs are. So anyway, this group had a dinner organized for a Friday night in a restaurant that was about, let's say, half an hour walk from where I lived. And I walk everywhere in Barcelona. And there was going to be a set menu of 15 euros. And I was like, 15 euros? That's so expensive. I don't have any money right now. So I toyed with the idea, should I go, should I not? I thought about, what's more important, the money or the loneliness, my lack of money or my massive loneliness. What's the bigger problem here? So in the end, I decided to go, and it was on a Friday night, because I thought if I don't go, I'm not going to see anyone for the whole weekend, So anyway, I went along and I spent my 15 euros. And during that dinner, there was a guy there who said, we're all going to have cocktails later. Do you want to come? And I was thinking, I can't afford it. I didn't want to say that though. And I said, I don't have much money. He said, I'll get you a cocktail. So I was like, oh my, really? Thank you. So I was super happy. And then obviously a mocktail, not a real cocktail, because I was already sober at this point. But then when I came out of that a cocktail experience, it was raining really hard, and I had to walk all the way home. I couldn't afford an umbrella, and I couldn't afford a taxi. And that was a really, harsh reality of my situation back then. So the next day I got up and I thought, something has to change in my life right now. I've gone through some really difficult times, but I'm just so tired of it, really. So I went down to the beach and just sat looking at the rough waves, because this is a time when it was the end of winter, so it was still kind of cold, and the waves were just invigorating. And I just looked out on the horizon and thought, I need to do something with my life. And also all of my deep fears kicked in. What am I going to do if I can't sustain this lifestyle that I've created in Barcelona as a content creator? Do I have to get a proper job? Do I have to go back to England? I mean, all of these fears, all these thoughts of failure were popping into my mind. And I just thought, no, that's not going to happen. Like, it can't happen. So I went back to my apartment and I started to Google lots of self-help content. And I came across the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And that has to be the book that has changed my life. And I ask all of my podcast guests, what is the book that changed your life? Because I want to obtain a collection of life-changing books. I'm so fascinated by how much a book can impact you, especially if you apply its lessons to your life. So Think and Grow Rich was just, for me, mind-blowing in the sense that, especially the chapter on the mystery of sex transmutation, because at this point in my life, I had been a sexpert for 9 years, and I thought I knew a lot about female pleasure. I knew a lot about sex toys. I had lots of opinions about sexuality as well. I'd been, lived various expressions of sexuality, and I was always very keen to share my knowledge. But knowing that there was this practice called sex transmutation, and what is sex transmutation really? Well, just going back to Think and Grow Rich, this is the best-selling success book of all time, written by Napoleon Hill, published in 1937. And he spent a couple of decades investigating the most successful men at the time. And he wanted to just put this kind of, I don't know how to describe it, a guide together of what is an abundant mindset, what is success, or what do these successful people have in common. So there's different chapters such as specialized knowledge, imagination, having a mastermind. But then this chapter about sex transmutation was the one that really blew my mind, because it's about how you harness your sexual energy and how you utilize it, how you are expressing it. For example, are you wasting it? Or are you actually harnessing this power and directing it towards your goals? He also mentions that sexual energy is things like charisma, magnetism, public speaking, how you dress, how your handshake, the energy in your handshake. So the first part of this particular chapter is all about that, all about the sexual energy and the non-sexual application of this energy. So in very basic terms, it's, for example, if you feel aroused, instead of acting out on that arousal, you would actually do another type of action instead of a physical kind of instant gratification action. You might start working on your body and getting fit. You might start writing the book that you want to write, or really focusing, whatever action that is. This action plays a part in the life that you are creating, your ideal life. So that's super interesting for me. And at the time, I was completely blown away by it, because I thought I knew a lot about sexuality. So discovering that there was this whole new purpose of sexuality was like finding a hidden door in a house that I thought I knew top to bottom. So I opened the door and I entered a world that really blew my mind. But before I got there, I thought, sexual transmutation, interesting, but I am a sex toy reviewer, and orgasm is a very key part of my work and of my existence. And I do not want to deny myself these orgasms, because sex transmutation there isn't any sexual stimulation involved in it. It's about kind of acknowledging the arousal and using your thoughts and perhaps breathing and guiding that energy towards a different outlet, an outlet that is not a sexual expression. So it felt like a form of sexual denial or orgasm denial to me. So I kept investigating. I thought I wasn't quite happy. That was, the seed that was planted. But I just wanted to find out if there were other ways of using our sexual energy to manifest. And that's when I came across a video called "How to Manifest," how to use orgasm to manifest, or something like that. And I was like, okay, now we are talking. And it was so interesting about. It was kind of a real shift on my own take on masturbation. And masturbation has been a very active part of my life, my personal life, and also my professional life as a sex toy reviewer. And this was a real mindset shift. For example, going from focusing on erotic triggers and things that are turning me on and trying to kind of get to destination orgasm almost as fast as possible, which is never really a good thing. Sometimes edging, but in general, it was really focusing on triggers and things that turn me on. But this was actually a shift and actually focusing on goals, non-sexual goals. They could be a new apartment, it could be some work-related things or money-related things. I was like, oh my God. So this was the Saturday I discovered this. The next day was a Sunday. And that's when I decided to put this theory into practice for the very first time. And at the time, I was really struggling with just getting food and just getting things like avocados and cashews were kind of out of my reach because just buying one avocado could cost €2 and getting a bag of cashews, that can be €3 to €4 or 5 depending on the quality. So I just decided, I was just thinking about these two ingredients and just cashews and avocados, and I closed my eyes and my mouth started to salivate as I imagined the textures of both of those things in my mouth. So I had my very first session of orgasmic manifestation. And at the time of actual orgasm, I just started thinking about myself, imagining myself in the supermarket buying cashews and avocados. The next day I woke up and I checked my bank and I couldn't believe it. There was an invoice that had been paid, which I didn't even expect. Actually, it was a bit of a write-off. I just thought that this client might not pay or that they were going to pay it very late. I'd kind of forgotten to chase it up kind of thing. So when it was surprised me by arriving in my bank on this day I just discovered sex magic, I was thinking, oh my God, this works. And to celebrate, I went to the supermarket and I bought cashews and avocados and made a wonderful salad. I actually do have pictures of my very last meal that I paid for, the €15 vegan meal. And because that was the last time I really struggled with money or wondering, how am I going to eat? And I've had many times like that in my life and wondering how I'm going to eat. But that was the last time back in March 2018. And I'm so grateful that I've been able to go from struggle to comfort. So to cut a long story short, I have been able to pay off all of my debts. I've been able to start, having a lot more, grow my audience. And also, as my audience has grown, I've been able to increase prices to a point where I am I'm living in a very comfortable level of life right now, which is, I wouldn't say I'm not a millionaire, but the point is the transformation that I have made has been phenomenal. Also, when I was I can't remember if I mentioned, I had no pillows back in that apartment in the sea. But now since then, I actually have really upgraded my life and I live in a really nice area of Barcelona, in an apartment that's about 4 times bigger. And, I've completely furnished it myself. And now I have 5 pillows, which really is the feeling of abundance for me, at least. Because comfort is something that I, really suffered, or lack of comfort has been something that has been a real challenge for me. So investing in comfort and food and things like that have been really, really important to me. And also getting, the equipment I need for my work, and also being able to outsource. So now I've been in this phase of growth. It hasn't always been linear and upwards. There have been peaks and troughs as well, but never going back to what I was living in the past. And I really do credit Orgasmic Manifestation for this massive improvement in my life. And as I, developed my own techniques of orgasmic manifestation, I also read all the books that I could find on the topic, and I've integrated some practices that have resonated with me while ignoring others. And I've gotten to a point now where I have several different practices of orgasmic manifestation, just that can be relevant to different times and different moods, or even different goals as well. So it all started with me actually imagining my goal during stimulation. To be very basic about this is not nothing new, by the way. This is something that's been around for millennia, I would say. But using sexual energy has been, for actual manifestation, is something that's been practiced in different civilizations throughout time. So this is why I really do believe that sexuality is so taboo, because it's powerful, and if we're just thinking about sex in a kind of porn way, or then I think this is taking away the power that we really have. I just think, if you know how to channel this energy towards your goals, it can be incredibly, incredibly profound. And also practicing this with a partner. So what is sexual transmutation or sex magic in basic terms? So basically, let's imagine that you want a new apartment. This could be or a new house or something. So imagine that you might set that intention before you indulge in. It could be masturbation, it could be partnered sex. If it's partnered sex, you have that extra layer of consent. It's very important that your partner knows that you're doing this, or maybe you're doing it together, but they should know, in my opinion. Definitely. I know that some of the books I've read don't always say the same thing as I do, but I think it's all about finding what works for you and what feels comfortable for you. But I think it's important to actually mention that you are doing this. So firstly, you would decide on a goal, and then you would indulge in sexual stimulation how you normally would. And then you can just enjoy the same things you enjoy all the time. And then just right at the point where you think you're going to have an orgasm, you go back to that desire. But more importantly, focusing on the desire, you want to focus on the feeling that manifesting that desire provides, which is very key in any type of manifestation process. Because, for example, you might not have ever experienced the thing that you desire, but you have experienced the emotions behind that thing. So that can help you connect with this desire more. For example, if it's a professional achievement, you might go back to a time in your life where you won a prize or you passed an exam and just really connect with that emotion. What did it feel like, and did it feel joyful, or was it more of a relief kind of feeling, something like that. So it's about really connecting with the feeling behind the desire just before the moment of climax. And that's it in very basic terms. But of course, there are many ways to actually do this. And in my book, I talk about, for example, it starts off talking about the history of sex magic, orgasm manifestation. And also I talk about the true power of sexual energy. And I really, I could present a framework of 3 levels of sexuality. Level 1 being overcoming shame and trauma. Level 2, pleasure and procreation. And level 3 is sexual power, which is the point of sexuality which is the least explored. It does take a certain type of person and practice to actually get there, to go beyond pleasure. And that's what's really exciting for me, because we've always been taught that pleasure is bad somehow. And I just think that being taught that sex is bad is disempowering. But when you know that it can actually be potentially a very powerful practice, this can actually really shift your perception of sexuality. I know it has for me. It's really changed my perception of sexuality and my own sexual pleasure and orgasms as well. In addition to these very basic techniques of just thinking of something or that tapping into that feeling, in my book, I also I have a chapter on, discovering what you want and making, a list, your wish list, and how to make a wish list. Because it's kind of crazy that we can often complain about our lives. But if someone says to you, what do you actually want? Then a lot of people don't really know. They know what they don't want maybe, or they know what they're complaining about, but they don't really know what they want. And then after that, I explained several different techniques. And these techniques can be, you can use them all, see which ones you like. They could be used as an individual practice, as a partnered practice, but I have examples of many different ways of indulging in sex magic. For example, there can be less or more ritual-based. Some people just like to keep it simple and not interrupt their normal practice as much at all, whereas other people want to go all in on the rituals. So there's a bit of variation there so that everyone can find what they're looking for. And then I have a whole part of the book based on enhancers, how you can enhance sex magic using things like affirmations, binaural beats, or even crystals or essential oils, or even working with lunar cycles. And on this podcast, we do have a lunar schedule as well, so a publishing schedule. So it's really exciting for me to actually focus or work with lunar energies, although it's not something I do all the time. And then in the end, it's about results. How can you track your results? And also a bit more about the process of manifestation. And what do you do if the thing you want is not coming into your life? Do you forget it, or do you keep trying? So a lot of this is actually based, a lot of this book is actually kind of related to manifestation in general. And then there are lots of examples of, specifically related to orgasmic manifestation. But there's no book about this topic like my book. I've just discovered so many layers to it. For example, incorporating affirmations or music and things like that, which I haven't really seen in other books. So this book is really for someone who's never heard of this and they want to discover more. It could be someone who's kind of new to these practices, new to spirituality, new to personal development. So I've tried to make this book as accessible as possible. But at the same time, I must confess that this topic, even though it's so dear to me, I always kind of feel a little bit afraid when I talk about it, because I'm thinking, who's the audience? Do they think I've lost my mind? I'm using masturbation to manifest. Oh my God. But also, sexuality is also taboo. So bringing sexuality with an esoteric practice can seem very weird to a lot of people, but I'm just learning more and more to honor my weirdness and just really stand in my power. And I just cannot keep this to myself anymore. Everyone I have taught about this, because I do give sessions, one-to-one coaching. I've given lots of workshops about this practice, and everyone I teach about it has had incredible results. It's kind of fascinating. Sometimes often they've had results that are more impressive than my own. And I think, oh my God, I need to start thinking bigger. But there's other work to do to actually become a great manifester. I think things like working on self-worth and self-concept are really also key on the journey to manifestation and creating the life of your dreams. So if you would like to check out my book, I would love you to obviously buy my book if you want to. But this is something that I want you to know, that this really does come from the heart and is being written from the heart. I kind of channeled it, to be honest. I didn't feel like I didn't have any writer's block at all. And I'm just really proud to share it with the world, even though there is a bit of lingering fear there. But now it's out there, and I just want this to be picked up and also enjoyed and applied in a way that brings joy and fulfillment to anyone who reads it. Anyway, so that is my story of orgasmic manifestation. Transform your life with your sexual energy. And I truly hope that if you do buy this book, that you have just as much luck as I have. Thank you. To find out more about me and my orgasmic lifestyle, visit venusohara.org or follow me on Instagram at instagram.com/venusohara. Make sure to search for the Orgasmic Lifestyle Podcast by Venus O'Hara in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Thanks for listening. Have an orgasmic week, and make sure every day is a climax.